Please comment where you are watching in the world. Before anything else, I want to be clear about who I was before all this began. My name is Marcus, and for most of my life, I was that guy your parents probably hoped you'd date. I followed rules, said please and thank you, and never dabbled in anything wild. I didn't drink, didn't smoke, and certainly didn't spend my weekends at bars or parties. I believed in respect and restraint. My relationships were low in number, but high in honesty. I wasn't perfect, but I was decent. So, as you read this, keep in mind that this wasn't the story of someone looking for trouble. It was the story of someone who stumbled into darkness while searching for something as simple as love or, at the very least, connection. I grew up in a quiet area near Asheville, North Carolina. Not the kind of place where people asked too many questions or lived particularly out loud. It was a town known for its mountains, churches, and whispers. I'd always been aware of the fact that I wasn't like most other guys in town. For as long as I could remember, I'd been attracted to both women and men. But I kept that part of myself locked up tight. I figured it wasn't something people needed to know unless I planned to act on it. And for a long time I didn't. But things started to shift a few years back. I'd spent so long trying to fit into a mold that wasn't made for me, and I began to feel like I was just passing through life instead of living it. On a particularly lonely night, I admitted it to myself. I'd never been with a man before, even though I'd thought about it more than I cared to admit. I was shy, not great at starting conversations, and I had a hard time making friends, let alone romantic connections. So I did what many lonely people do these days. I turned to the internet. At first, my dating profiles were geared toward women. I told myself that was the plan. Find a nice girl, settle down, and maybe the other part of me would fade into the background. But finding a meaningful connection with women online turned out to be harder than expected. I swiped right on nearly anyone who seemed remotely interesting, but the results were consistently disappointing. Most of the women I matched with were either uninterested, unkind, or looking for something entirely different than what I had to offer. Some of them were single mothers who wanted help raising children I wasn't ready for. Others simply weren't serious. And the few who seemed promising never replied to my messages. I'm not claiming to be a model, but I'm not repulsive either. I figured I'd at least find someone on the same level, but that never seemed to happen. One night, I matched with a woman named Tara, who seemed like she might be the one. She was gorgeous, child-free, and had a smile that made me pause. We arranged to meet up for dinner, but on the day of the date, she messaged me saying her car had broken down and asked if I could send her $500 for repairs. She promised to pay me back. That was when I blocked her and deleted the app for good. After that, I took a break from dating entirely, but the loneliness didn't go away. Eventually, I found myself wondering, what if I gave the other side of myself a real chance? So, somewhat nervously, I downloaded an app called Ember, a dating app mostly used by gay and bisexual men. I created a profile and uploaded a few photos. I was honest about who I was, unsure of what I was looking for, but open to the experience. That same night, I matched with a guy named Julian. Julian was exactly the kind of man I'd always been drawn to, but had never allowed myself to pursue. He was tall, athletic, confident, and had a smile that made me feel seen. I didn't expect much, maybe a conversation, maybe a coffee. But within minutes, we were chatting. Hours passed like minutes. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to meet up that night. I hesitated. This wasn't me. I'd never done anything like this. But then I said yes. We skipped the formalities, no coffee shop or dinner table. Instead, I drove to his apartment near downtown Charlotte. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. He was magnetic. We didn't talk much, we didn't need to. The night unfolded in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was nervous, but he was patient. We spent hours together, and when I finally left, I was buzzing with adrenaline and confusion. I'd never felt so alive. The next few weeks blurred together. I saw Julian a few more times, and between our meetings, I started hooking up with other men I met on Ember. What started as curiosity quickly turned into something else. I found myself addicted, not just to the physical side, but to the feeling of being wanted. I began living for the weekends, sometimes sneaking out during the week. I told myself I was exploring, figuring things out, but deep down I was spiraling. Then I met Troy. Troy didn't seem dangerous at first. He had a soft voice, a polite smile, and a clean-cut appearance that reminded me of a church youth leader. But he introduced himself with a preference. He liked role-playing. I didn't know much about that world, but I was curious, and more than a little eager to please. Our first encounter was strange, but not threatening. He asked me to play a character, follow a script. It felt more like acting than intimacy. But as our meetings continued, Troy's requests grew darker. He became controlling, demanding, and cruel. He insulted me, degraded me, and made me feel inferior. Despite it all, I kept going back. I've asked myself why 1,000 times. Maybe it was the attention. Maybe it was the belief that I didn't deserve better. Maybe it was something else entirely. After a while, I began to suspect he was drugging me. I'd leave his apartment feeling foggy, disoriented, and unable to remember parts of our encounters. I started to dread seeing him, yet I couldn't stop. He told me I wasn't allowed to see anyone else. He said I belonged to him. Then came the night he asked me to do the unthinkable. He wanted me to hurt something. Not someone, but something. He brought out a small animal, alive, placed it in front of me, and whispered, "Do it." I froze. In that moment, something inside me cracked. I slapped the animal out of his hand and punched him in the chest. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, driving aimlessly through the night. I blocked his number, deleted Ember, and tried to erase him from my life. But Troy wasn't done. He showed up at my job a week later, staring at me from across the parking lot. He didn't say anything, just watched. I reported him to the police, but they told me there wasn't enough evidence. I applied for a restraining order, and eventually it was granted. I haven't seen him since, but I check over my shoulder more than I used to. I still have nightmares. It's hard to explain what Troy did to me. It wasn't just physical. He rewired something in me, made me question my own instincts, made me feel complicit in my own degradation. It took months of therapy to begin to understand what I went through. And even now, I don't have all the answers. I only know that I survived. After that, I swore off men. I went back to dating women, thinking it would be safer, simpler. I met a girl named Lauren on a more mainstream dating app. She was sweet, funny, and loved animals. We hit it off instantly. She even knew about my past and didn't judge me. She said everyone had a story. But even that didn't last. Eventually, Lauren grew distant. She stopped responding to texts, canceled plans, and made excuses. One night, I drove by her house, hoping to surprise her with flowers. Instead, I saw her through the window, laughing with another guy. I didn't knock. I didn't say a word. I just drove away. That was the last time I tried dating for a long while. These days, I live alone in a small house near a lake. I spend my evenings reading or watching movies. Sometimes I take walks through the woods behind my property, letting the quiet settle over me. I still feel the urge to reach out, to swipe, to connect. But I don't. The risk feels too high. People always talk about red flags in relationships, but what they fail to mention is how easy it is to miss them when you're lonely. It had been a rough semester. I was in my second year at Evergrove University in Vermont, living alone for the first time in a small single dorm on the edge of campus. My roommate from freshman year had transferred to a school in Oregon, and most of the people I spent time with had either dropped out or moved to off-campus housing. I had friends, but not the kind you could really lean on. I spent a lot of nights alone, studying or scrolling endlessly on my phone, wondering if this was what college was supposed to feel like. Eventually, I downloaded LinkUp, a dating app a lot of students used. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to talk to, maybe hang out with. Even just texting someone back and forth felt like a relief from the silence. That's how I met Darren. He had brown hair, kind eyes, and a crooked smile in his photos. His profile was short and sweet. Just moved back to Vermont. Looking for someone chill to get to know. We started chatting late one night after I uploaded a new picture. He messaged me first, saying I looked familiar, like someone he'd seen at the coffee shop near campus. I laughed and told him I basically lived there, which wasn't far from the truth. Our conversation flowed easily. He was funny, a little sarcastic, and knew all the right things to say to make me feel interesting. Within a couple of days, we were texting off the app. By the end of the week, we'd moved to video calls. He said he liked my voice, that he could tell I was the kind of person who saw the good in people. That probably should have been the first warning sign. He asked if he could come by my dorm one evening, said he wanted to bring me dinner. I hesitated, but he promised it would just be burgers and fries from a place he loved. Not a big deal, he said. You don't even have to dress up. So I agreed. He arrived wearing an oversized hoodie and carrying a paper bag that smelled amazing. We sat cross-legged on the floor of my dorm, talking and eating like we'd known each other for years. He complimented my posters, asked about my major, and told me he'd spent a year in California before deciding he hated the West Coast. Too many people pretending to be someone they're not, he said. Vermont's more real. We ended up watching a movie on my laptop. Nothing happened beyond a long hug when he left, but my stomach fluttered for hours afterward. For the first time in months, I felt wanted. Darren came over twice more that week. Each time felt more comfortable. He'd sit on the edge of my bed, tell me stories about his family, his travels, his plans for the future. He asked a lot of questions, and I answered them all without thinking. It felt good to be seen, to be asked. But then something shifted. It started with a cigarette. We were sitting outside the dorm on a cool Thursday evening. He reached into his coat pocket and lit one without asking. I wrinkled my nose and scooted away slightly. "You smoke?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah," he said, exhaling. "Occasionally. Calms me down." I told him I didn't like smoking, that it reminded me of my uncle, who died from lung cancer. It wasn't meant as a lecture, just a boundary. He nodded, but the air changed. The next day, I texted him to say I didn't think we were compatible. That I liked him, but the smoking was a deal breaker for me. I tried to be kind. He didn't reply. At first. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. Then another. Then a text. "You're really gonna throw this away over something that doesn't matter?" I didn't respond. The next morning, there were 10 missed calls and a string of increasingly emotional messages waiting on my phone. "I thought you were different. I told you things I've never told anyone. You're just like the rest of them." I blocked his number. But the messages kept coming, from new numbers, different area codes. He found me on social media. First Instagram, then Snapchat, then LinkedIn. I'd never even mentioned where I worked part-time, but somehow he knew. I started to panic. I tried reporting his accounts, but he'd just make new ones. I changed my privacy settings, deleted my TikTok, removed my last name from my Facebook. I told myself he'd get bored eventually, but he didn't. One night, I was studying with my friend Hallie in my dorm room when my phone lit up with a text from another unknown number. "I saw you today. Who was that with you?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't posted anything. There was no way he should have known where I'd been. Unless he was watching. I showed Hallie the message. She stared at it, then at me. "You need to tell someone," she said. I didn't want to. It felt dramatic. I didn't want to be the girl who cried wolf over a guy she barely dated. But Hallie insisted. She grabbed my phone and made me walk with her to the RA's office. Our residential advisor, Alana, was a grad student, a no-nonsense type who'd handled roommate disputes and late-night parties, but nothing like this. Still, she listened as I explained everything. The calls, the messages, the feeling of being watched. When I finished, she nodded once and said, "We're going to report this to campus security, and I'm moving you to a different dorm." I protested, but she didn't budge. "You need space," she said. "You need to feel safe." That night, I packed my things and moved into a different building across campus. My new room was smaller, but it had better lighting and thicker curtains. I kept my phone on silent and barely slept. The next morning, I had 5 missed calls again. One number left a voicemail. "I know what you're doing," he said. "You think you can hide from me? You can't. I'm not going anywhere." I forwarded the message to the campus police, who said they'd contact local authorities. But because Darren hadn't made a direct threat, and because we'd only dated briefly, there was little they could do. For the next week, I lived in fear. I couldn't walk to class alone. I had friends escort me everywhere. I switched my route to the dining hall. I stopped going to my favorite coffee shop. I avoided the library, the gym, even my building's laundry room. Every time I passed a guy with brown hair or a dark hoodie, I flinched. Then, one evening, I got a message on WhatsApp, a platform I hadn't even realized was linked to my number. "You can't ignore me forever. I still love you." That was when I broke. I went to the campus counselor the next day and sobbed in her office for nearly an hour. She helped me file for a no-contact order. It wasn't a full restraining order, but it meant Darren was officially barred from contacting me in any way. If he did, there would finally be legal consequences. That night, I got one last message. "I hope you're happy. You ruined something real." Then silence. I didn't hear from him again. It's been over a year now, and I still check the locks twice before bed. I still flinch when my phone rings from an unknown number. I still feel a chill when I walk alone at night. I've deleted all my dating apps. I don't trust anyone who messages me first. I've become suspicious of kindness, wary of compliments. People say online dating is a gamble. that you have to take risks to find something meaningful. But the truth is, I wasn't looking for something dangerous. I wasn't naive. I was just lonely. And that loneliness almost cost me my safety. They always say to trust your gut. I wish I had. I wish I hadn't brushed off the little signs, the subtle discomfort, the quiet voice inside me that whispered, "This doesn't feel right." My name is Elena. I was 21 when it happened, still trying to shake off the small-town dust clinging to me after moving to a mid-sized city in Missouri. I'd grown up in a sleepy community where everyone knew everyone, and news traveled faster than the wind. By contrast, St. Charles was vibrant, unfamiliar, and full of strangers with stories I hadn't heard 100 times before. I thought dating in the city would be refreshing. I thought maybe I'd finally meet someone who didn't already know my cousin or my childhood nickname. So I tried something new. I made a profile on Streamheart, a dating app my coworker swore by. She said she met her fiancé on there, and they were planning a destination wedding in the Bahamas. I wasn't expecting a ring or a honeymoon. I just wanted to meet someone who made me laugh, who'd ask me about my day and actually care about the answer. His name was Colin. At least, that's what he said. He messaged me after I uploaded a new photo of myself at a local botanical garden, the one with the big yellow tulips that bloom early in the season. "You look like someone who appreciates quiet places," he wrote. I smiled. That was different. Not "Hey sexy," or "What are you into tonight?" Just a simple, thoughtful observation. We started chatting. He said he was 26, recently moved to St. Charles from Kansas City, worked in design, something to do with automotive interiors, and liked hiking, chess, and old movies. He wasn't especially handsome in his photos, but there was something calming about his face. A softness around the eyes. A kind of quiet intelligence. I told him I was studying early childhood education, working part-time at a daycare, and living in a small apartment with a roommate who was rarely home. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I said. He didn't rush the conversation or push for anything inappropriate. For 4 days, we exchanged messages and voice notes. I began to relax. Then he asked if I wanted to meet. "I'd love to," I replied, then hesitated. "But maybe we should start somewhere public? Coffee or something?" He didn't respond right away. When he did, he said, "Totally understand. But I just moved into this new place, and it's a bit messy. I was thinking of a walk instead. There's a park not far from me, Grantwood Fields. It's got open space, some benches. Really peaceful." I looked it up. It was real. And it wasn't too far. "Sure," I said. "If the weather's good." It was. The day we met, the sky was cloudless and blue, and the air carried the scent of cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. I wore jeans and a soft gray hoodie, tied my hair back, and left my pepper spray in the front pocket of my bag, just in case. Colin met me at the edge of the park near an old, rusted playground. He looked exactly like his pictures. A little taller than I expected, wearing a black jacket and dark jeans. He smiled when he saw me, not a big grin, just a small, polite curve of his lips. "You made it," he said. We walked for a while, talking about nothing in particular. The park was quiet, too quiet. It was a weekday afternoon, and only a few distant joggers and dog walkers passed us by. He led me toward an old baseball field tucked behind a long stretch of pine trees. I hadn't even known it was there. The bleachers were overgrown with weeds, and the dugouts were tagged with graffiti. Still, it had a kind of charm. We sat on the edge of the field, our feet dangling into the red dirt. "Used to play a little," he said, gesturing to the field. "Not seriously. Just Sunday games." "You ever play?" "No," I laughed. I was the kid who always got hit in the face during gym class. He chuckled, leaned back on his hands, and looked up at the sky. For a moment, I felt okay. Not anxious. Not alert. Just present. Then everything changed. It happened so fast I still struggle to recall the exact sequence. One moment, we were talking about summer storms. The next, he was pushing me backward, hard. I landed on my back in the dirt, breath knocked out of me. He was on top of me before I could move, his hands gripping my wrists. I remember the smell of his breath, coffee and something sour, and the weight of him pressing into my chest. I screamed, but it came out thin and weak. He clamped a hand over my mouth. "Don't," he hissed. "Just be quiet." I kicked, thrashed, tried to twist out from under him. I scraped my elbow on a rock. My knee hit something hard and sharp. Panic surged up my spine like electricity. I couldn't breathe. I thought of my roommate, who wouldn't notice I was gone. Of my mom, who who always told me to text when I got home. Something primal kicked in. I bit his hand. Hard. He yelped and recoiled. I took the chance to shove him off, scrambled to my feet, and ran. Ran like every horror movie I'd ever watched, like every nightmare I'd ever had. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I ran across the field, through the trees, down the path, and all the way to the edge of the parking lot. My car was parked on a side street. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, picked them up, and finally got the door open. I locked myself inside, shaking, crying, hands trembling so badly I could barely start the engine. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for an hour, trying to calm down, trying to breathe. I called my sister, told her I'd had a panic attack. I didn't tell her the truth. Not yet. The next day, I went to the police. I gave them his name, his profile, our messages. I showed them where it happened. They took notes. Asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. They said they'd look into it. They never called me back. The app removed his profile within 48 hours. When I checked again, it was like he'd never existed. But I couldn't stop thinking about the house. He'd mentioned it once, said he was renting a place nearby, a small house on a quiet street. I remembered the street name. So one afternoon, against every bit of advice I'd ever heard, I drove by. The house was strange. It looked abandoned. The grass was knee-high, the windows covered with thick curtains. A car with no plates sat in the driveway. I parked a few houses down and watched. After a few minutes, someone came out the front door. It wasn't Colin. It was a man in his 50s, wearing a stained hoodie and mismatched shoes. He looked at me. I looked away. When I glanced back, he was gone. I left. Fast. Later, I told a friend who worked in city records about the house. She looked it up and found it had been reported multiple times, for noise complaints, suspicious activity, and once for a possible break-in. But nothing ever came of it. It was known, she said. I never went back. Months passed, but the fear didn't. I moved out of my apartment and found a new place across town. I changed my number. I deleted Streamheart and every other dating app. I stopped walking alone. I carried my pepper spray everywhere. I told myself I was lucky. Because I was. But luck shouldn't be what keeps a person safe. I still think about that field. That moment. That house. The man who smiled and asked about my childhood and then tried to hurt me. I wonder how many others he's met. How many didn't get away. Sometimes I think about going public, posting about him, naming names. But then I remember the look in his eyes when I bit him. The way he didn't even seem surprised. Like he'd done this before. My story is like something out of a true crime podcast, but unfortunately, it was real life, and I was the one who had to figure out how to escape before my life was in danger. I met this boy, Adam, on Bumble. Handsome man, polite, chatty, the usual. The biggest plus for me was his love for dogs. That is a huge win in my eyes. After a week or so of texting, sending each other pics of our beloved furry friends, he asked if I wanted to grab some drinks. I wasn't getting any weird vibes, so I agreed. The date started like any other. We met at a fairly busy bar not far from my place. Adam was good-looking, well-dressed, and friendly. He asked me lots of questions about myself, what I studied at university, where I was from, whether I liked to travel, and of course where my love for dogs originated from. He seemed genuinely interested in me, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy's actually nice, unlike my previous partners and dates. But looking back, there were little things that felt off. Like how he kept steering the conversation back to my family, asking if I was close to them, whether they lived nearby, if I had anyone I relied on. At the time, I thought he was just being curious, but now it makes my stomach turn. After a couple of drinks, he suggested we head back to his place to keep the night going. I hesitated for a second. I'd only just met him, after all. Booty didn't want to seem paranoid. Plus, he lived close by, and I figured I could leave any time if things got weird. So I agreed. When we got to his place, it was a bit messier than I expected. Not like serial killer Lair messy, but enough to make me question how much effort he really put into having people over. There were empty takeout containers on the counter, random clothes tossed on a chair, and the whole place smelled faintly of stale beer. That's when I started to feel a little uneasy. Not terrified, just off. Adam, however, seemed perfectly at ease. He offered me a drink, but I declined, saying I'd already had enough. He laughed it off, saying, "You don't trust me?" in this joking but not really tone. I laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. But the vibe was definitely shifting. I told him I needed to use the bathroom, and he pointed me down the hall. As I walked through his apartment, I noticed more odd details. The locks on the inside of the front door were strange. Heavy duty, like something you'd see on a warehouse, not a flat. There were no pictures on the walls, no signs of a life lived in this space, just stacks of random junk and a few pieces of mismatched furniture. I stepped into the bathroom and locked the door behind me, taking a moment to just breathe. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I splashed some water on my face, trying to shake the uneasy feeling, and that's when I noticed the window. It was small, just above the toilet, and it looked out onto the street. As I glanced out, something caught my eye, a van pulling up in front of the building. It was black, no windows in the back, the kind of vehicle you see in crime dramas when someone's about to get kidnapped. Two men got out, both wearing dark clothes, and they walked around to the back of the van, opening the doors. My stomach dropped. I don't know why, but something about the way they moved, the way they looked around like they were checking to see if anyone was watching, it set off every alarm bell in my head. I froze, watching as they pulled out what looked like restraints. Rope? I couldn't tell exactly, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. I immediately thought, I need to get out of here. Now. Right F now. I unlocked the bathroom door and quietly made my way back toward the main room. Adam was standing by the window, looking out at the street. When he saw me, he jumped a little, like he wasn't expecting me to come back so soon. "You okay?" he asked, his voice overly casual. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. "Actually, I think I should head home. It's getting late." His expression changed, just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. It was like he wasn't expecting me to leave. "Oh, come on," he said, forcing a smile. "The night's just getting started." "No, really," I said, grabbing my jacket. "I've got an early morning." He stepped in front of me, blocking the door. "Why are you in such a rush?" he asked, his tone sharper now. "You're not scared of me, are you?" My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Of course not," I said, laughing nervously. "I just really need to get home. Maybe we can hang out again later this week." He stared at me for a moment, like he was trying to decide whether to let me go. Finally, he stepped aside. "All right," he said, his voice cold. "Let me walk you out." "No need," I said quickly. "I'll be fine." And then I bolted. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the block. I glanced back just in time to see Adam standing in the doorway, watching me with this furious look on his face. The van was still parked out front, and the two men were now leaning against it, talking quietly. I didn't stick around to find out what they were planning. When I got home, I locked every door and window and called my best friend, telling her everything. She begged me to report it to the police, but I didn't know what to say. "Hi, I think my date might be a human trafficker." It sounded insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The weird questions about my family, the strange locks, the black van. I don't know for sure what would have happened if I'd stayed, but I'm not interested in finding out. 2 weeks ago, I met a guy on Tinder, Victor. In his profile photo, he had brown hair that was so dark, it almost looked black, styled in a sort of half-up, half-down style. His neck was tattooed with a spider web behind his ear, with a web trailing down to showcase a realistic spider biting his neck. He had other tattoos, but they all seemed to be abstract compared to this one, seemingly just done any old way. He wore red contacts, but it almost looked like he had red eyes with a hint of brown that resembled honey in the sunlight. As his pink lips held a lollipop stick in his mouth, he was taking a selfie in the mirror of a public bathroom. I was about to swipe right, but decided to check his bio to be sure he didn't list anything that could be considered a red flag. He was my age, 23. His bio simply stated, "I hope you like vampires, because I'm a neck biter who doesn't mind the taste of blood." While all my friends found it cringy when I told them about it, I found it arousing. I have a thing for vampires, if you couldn't already guess. So this was a win for me. We got to messaging, and he expressed interest in hooking up. After some diligent planning, we agreed to start off going out to get to know each other. We wanted to take things slow, understanding boundaries and personalities before we began doing anything. Our first meetup was at the local Arby's, where we talked over sandwiches and curly fries. We had an incredible time. We shared many of the same kinks, interests, and boundaries. It was as if the sex gods had sent this gorgeous man in my direction for a reason. The night after that, I had began experiencing difficulties sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, it was as though something had triggered my beagle, Riley. He would start panicking, barking and growling at my window. Every time I would go check, there would be nothing in sight. I figured perhaps the shadow of a nearby tree was upsetting him, so I put him in his crate for the night. I could hear his muffled barking downstairs for a few minutes, but soon it stopped. In the morning, I discovered something on my window when I went to open the blinds. There was a hand print, as if someone was attempting to break in. However, they seemed to be bloody. The blood seemed as though it was dripping from the middle and index finger, then dried there. I rushed outside in my pajamas in the freezing cold to see if perhaps something had just rusted, but when I looked, the hand print was no longer there. In disbelief, I went back inside and there wasn't anything. I chalked it up to nothing, assuming my half-asleep body was still adjusting to the morning light. I just went about my life until Victor and I had met up again. Something odd seemed to happen when we were talking, though. He asked me how the advertisement I was working on had come out. I work at a small bank as the graphic design department. I create all-out advertisements, signs for our 4 locations, and promotional photos for social media. I had been working on an advertisement over the last week, but I had never told him that. At least, I don't recall telling him about it. Regardless, I answered the question no matter how odd it seemed to be. Again, the night after our meetup, strange things happened. When I sent Riley to go potty that night, he wouldn't come in when I was calling him, which is very unlike him. He's very well trained and somewhat clingy at bedtime, so I walked into the yard to find him staring at the fence. This fence separates my yard with my next-door neighbor's yard. Riley was frozen in place, staring at a figure. This figure had on a hood, and I couldn't see his face because of the darkness. My neighbor's back porch light went out the other night, and they had yet to fix it, whereas mine doesn't really go far enough to see past this fence. The only thing I did see was 2 hands, their fingernails red like they were stained with blood. I screamed bloody murder, grabbing Riley and slamming the back door on the way back in. I locked all my doors and windows. After calling both police and my neighbors about the situation, everyone was getting my story. The police informed me that they could not do anything as I didn't see much and neither of us have cameras to prove anyone was there. They told me it was probably a childish prank from another neighbor's kid. I felt so crazy in that moment, thinking perhaps I have started hallucinating or that my eyes played tricks on me. That was, until the neighbor's wife let out her own scream of bloody murder that mixed with gut-wrenching sobs. We rushed over to their backyard, where the neighbor was hugging her now dead cat. I never knew they had a cat, but that's because he never had been let outside. The cat was covered in blood, said to be stabbed 7 times. I didn't sleep that night. I spent it sobbing, hugging Riley. It was clear the person had bad intentions, and I just narrowly escaped him while also saving my baby. I told no one in my life about this, because I do not want them thinking that I am crazy. I know there is proof that last night was real. I'm still questioning if maybe I was seeing things, and it was some sort of spiritual sign to save my dog, even if I could not save the neighbor's cat. Victor was like a rock to me, giving something to look forward to as the traumatic visuals of that figure haunted my everyday movements. We set up a date to hook up, wanting to try something with blood and needles. I was excited as I have never had anything of this. I always loved exploring new kinks and fetishes. At work, it was clear I wasn't well as my boss sent me home early. On my way home, I stopped by a gas station to fill up and get some snacks. While I was pumping gas into my car, I heard my phone buzz in my purse. I fished it out of there quickly, seeing a weird text from my neighbor. She told me there was a weird man trying to break into my house, but when the police came there was no sign of him. However, a very small portion of my lawn had been burnt by a cigarette left by the driveway. Now I was freaked out. Why is this happening to me? Who is targeting me? Does this mean everything from before was true, and I'm the one this man is after? When I asked for a description, it was the same hooded figure from before, but when the neighbor asked to know who he was, he smiled at her with a blistered face and pink teeth. She screamed, which alerted another neighbor to call the police. I now could not stay at my home, so with a friend, we headed to my house to gather my essentials, and I stayed with her for a couple days. I brought Riley along. Everything had seemed all right, nothing else had happened. However, the day I was meant to return home, a car followed me to work, driving away when I pulled into the parking lot. At first, I didn't question it as my friend has an apartment and assumed he was part of the complex, taking a similar route to work. Looking back, it had to be that guy. When I got back home, my living room was wrecked. Nothing was stolen, no signs of a break-in, just trashed. Now, I was utterly terrified to stay in this house, as someone clearly had something out for me. I was not going to take the risk of sleeping here and getting murdered in my sleep. I told Victor about everything, and he offered to let me have his spare room. I protested, insisting I can get a motel. He refused, promising he had a gun if he needed to defend me from anyone. I reluctantly agreed, but his house was very welcoming. The decor was a mix of Gothic but modern, yet it had all seemed to homey. Riley seemed a little uneasy, however. I assumed it was the stress of the stalker and having to constantly move. We hooked up the next night. It was amazing. He pleased me in a way I had not ever dreamed of, soon becoming addicted to him. We did it a couple more times afterwards. Every time we did, he wore me out and I would need a nap or to rest from the night. So after some aftercare, Victor tucked me in and said he would wake me up in the morning when breakfast was prepared. At 3 a.m., I heard a scream. A dog's scream. My stomach dropped as I scrambled out of bed to rush downstairs, thinking Riley fell off something or got hurt somehow. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, there was a man. He had patches of hair on his head, red fingernails, blisters all over. He was leaning over Riley. I yelled for Victor, hoping he was in the bathroom. Only, the man turned to look at me, and I screamed. The man was Victor. The same blistered man at my house, the same red fingernails from my neighbor's yard, and those pink teeth. He looked like he wasn't ready for me to see him. Riley was on this carpet, bleeding. He had been drinking his blood, the knife still in his pocket. He reached for it when I ran back upstairs and barricaded myself in his bedroom, the only room with a lock. The lock was locked with furniture in front of the door for good measure. I noticed a blood stain on his carpet under a chair in this room. This wasn't my first time. Yes, he had a vial of my blood from our session, but I thought we had used it. I found 4 more in the closet when I emptied it. I knew I was in danger, especially as he pounded on the door, growling out my name. He soon resorted to stabbing the door, hoping I was behind it. I rushed to get dressed and grab my stuff as I heard him begging to be let in, saying he needs my blood to cure him. He needed my nutrients. He promised he would be good to me if I just supplied him with his medicine. I didn't listen, especially as he punched a hole through the door. I was out the window by the time he was peeking through the door, screaming my name. I had thrown my stuff before me, which somewhat cushioned my fall from the room. My ankle is fucked from the fall, but it didn't matter. I ran to my car and threw my stuff in the back as I saw the knife get stabbed through the front door. He ran after my car as I sped away. In the ER, I explained everything to the nurses and the police. I've been tested for STDs and STIs. I haven't gotten the results back yet. I gave the police my statement, in which they informed me Victor's house was abandoned. No one had lived there in 5 years. And his Tinder was gone too. I only had a photo of his neck and chest, nothing of his face. I don't think they're ever going to find him, if he even exists. I do not feel safe. I've quit my job, moved, dyed my hair. I've even gotten filler hoping it changed my appearance some. I'm a wreck without Riley, but the image of that man drinking his blood haunts me from ever wanting another beagle again. I'm in a motel right now, as I hop between them hoping I'll never be discovered. I'm running out of savings, which terrifies me. My mom has offered up my old room if I ever need to move back home, and has suggested counseling. I cannot leave the motels, I just can't. I don't know if I'll survive, which is why I write to the internet in the hopes that if he does find me, at least the world will know I am not crazy. That my story can be a cautionary tale. Not everyone is as they seem. They can ruin your life in an instant. You can run into Victor at any time, and I cannot let another soul be cursed with being tortured by him too. So please, be careful who you meet online. Especially Tinder. When I first met Jason, I thought he was just a little quirky. We met through a dating app called Brightside. It was marketed as a space for authentic connections and emotionally intelligent singles. I was in the middle of my second year in a nursing program at a community college in Oregon City, balancing clinical hours, exams, and part-time work at a pharmacy. I didn't have time for games, and I sure as hell didn't have time for drama. I just wanted to meet someone who could talk about something other than TikTok trends or what they bench press. Jason's profile didn't raise any red flags at first. He was 28, said he worked in freelance research, and had a degree in communications. His pictures showed him hiking, playing guitar, and holding a cat named Pickles. He messaged first, which I appreciated, and our chat started off light. Movies, music, favorite books. He mentioned he liked documentaries, especially ones that challenged the mainstream narrative. I thought he meant true crime. We talked for about 2 weeks before meeting in person. I was cautious, I always am, so we agreed to meet at a small cafe near the riverfront. It was the kind of place where elderly couples played chess on the patio, and the baristas knew people's orders by heart. I wore my favorite sweater, the one with the embroidered sunflowers, and showed up 5 minutes early. Jason was already there. He gave me a half smile and stood awkwardly when he saw me, like he wasn't sure whether to hug me or shake my hand. I went for a wave and a quick hey to break the tension. He was taller than I expected, with thick glasses and a mop of curly hair that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in days. We ordered coffee and sat by the window. The first 30 minutes were surprisingly normal. He asked about my nursing program, told me about his cat, and even shared a funny story about accidentally sending a text meant for his sister to his boss. I laughed genuinely, but then I mentioned that I'd shadowed a surgeon the week before, and somehow that led him into a long monologue about how most hospitals are just fronts for pharmaceutical lobbying. I blinked. Wait, what do you mean? He leaned in, his voice dropping a little. I mean, do you really think they're trying to save people? It's about control, about pushing drugs and keeping people sick. That's how they make money. I sipped my coffee and nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. He continued, undeterred. You know the government has patents on viruses, right? Like literal ownership. And you've heard of HARP, right? The Weather Control Project? I hadn't. Or maybe I had in passing, but I didn't expect it to come up over a cappuccino. He saw the confusion on my face and smiled, as if he'd just confirmed something. You're curious. That's good. Most people just accept whatever CNN or MSNBC tells them. But not you. I forced a smile and changed the subject. We finished our drinks, and I told him I had an early class the next morning. He offered to walk me to my car. I declined, saying I had parked nearby. It was a lie, but I didn't want him to know which car was mine. Despite the weirdness, I didn't block him right away. For a few days, he sent me links to YouTube videos and articles with titles like The Truth About Fluoride and NASA Lies, Moon Landing Exposed. I ignored most of them, replying only with emojis or a quick interesting. Then he asked to see me again. And for some reason, I said yes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I felt bad. Maybe I thought I could understand him better in person. We agreed to go for a drive. He said he knew a great overlook with a view of the city. He picked me up that Friday night in a midnight blue sedan that smelled strongly of incense and old coffee. The dashboard was cluttered with sticky notes and a cracked phone holder. A bobblehead of Nikola Tesla bounced on the dash. Cool car, I said, buckling my seatbelt. Thanks, he replied, eyes on the road. It's not chipped. I had the tracker removed. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The drive was quiet for the first 10 minutes. Then he started talking about the grid, deep state surveillance, and how he never used public Wi-Fi. I nodded politely, offering small, oh, and really, responses while trying to mask my growing discomfort. When we reached the overlook, I stepped out quickly, pretending to admire the view. The city lights twinkled below, and for a moment, I wished I were anywhere else. That's when he asked, "Do you ever get the feeling that none of this is real?" I turned to him. "What do you mean?" He stared out over the city, his face unreadable. "I mean, sometimes I wonder if we're just part of some massive simulation. Like everything we see and feel, it's programmed. Controlled." I didn't respond. He looked at me then, his eyes intense. "I think you feel it too. That pull. That itch in the back of your mind. Like you're meant for something more." "I think I should head back," I said, suddenly cold despite my jacket. He didn't argue. Just nodded and got back in the car. The ride back was silent. He dropped me off outside my apartment and said, "Be careful who you trust." I didn't reply. That night, I deleted his number. I blocked him on Brightside and on every social platform we'd connected through. I told myself it was over. But it wasn't. A week later, I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't answer. Then another. And another. I started getting emails from addresses I didn't recognize, all with subject lines like, "You need to know this," and "Wake up, Allie." One message just said, "They're watching you too." I changed my email. Then one evening, as I was walking back from class, I saw a figure standing near my apartment building. At first, I didn't recognize him. He was wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. But as I got closer, he turned slightly, and I saw the edge of his glasses glint under the streetlight. "Jason." I didn't go inside. I kept walking, heart pounding, until I reached the nearby gas station. I stayed there for nearly an hour, pretending to browse snacks until a friend could come pick me up. I filed a report with campus security. They said without a direct threat or proof of harassment, there wasn't much they could do. One officer suggested I carry pepper spray. I started doing more than that. I changed my number. I started taking different routes to class. I stopped going anywhere alone. I told my professors I was dealing with a personal safety issue and might need to switch to online exams. 3 weeks passed without incident. Then one night, I was scrolling through local news headlines before bed when I saw it. Man arrested after holding mother hostage in Oregon City home. The photo was grainy, but I knew that face. Jason. The article said he'd barricaded himself and his mother in their home for more than 12 hours. Police had been called after neighbors heard screaming. He claimed the agency was after him and that his mother was compromised. He'd been taken into custody and placed under psychiatric evaluation. I stared at the screen for a long time, numb. The next morning, I showed the article to my advisor and requested a temporary leave from clinical rotations. She took one look at the headline and didn't ask any questions. It's been over a year since then. I haven't heard from him again. I don't know where he is or what happened after his evaluation. When I was 16, I told myself I was smarter than most people my age. I read books on psychology for fun, corrected my teacher's grammar, and rolled my eyes at friends who fell headfirst into online drama. I thought I could spot a fake account from a mile away. I thought I was immune. I wasn't. It started quietly, like most dangerous things do. I had just finished my sophomore year of high school in a small town outside of Madison, Wisconsin. We weren't remote, but we weren't exactly bustling either. There wasn't much to do besides scroll through social media, text friends, and hang out at the same 3 coffee shops on weekends. I spent a lot of time online, mainly on a site called Friendboard, which was a mix between a forum and a messenger app. It was mostly teenagers, or so I thought. I joined a public chat room about photography, something I had picked up as a hobby. I posted a few of my pictures, close-ups of trees, abandoned railroad tracks, my cat sleeping in the sun. The responses were kind, encouraging, and then one message stood out. Your lighting is really thoughtful. You've got an eye for stillness. It wasn't the usual cool pic or nice shot. It was specific. The message was from a user named SkyGuy17. We started chatting in the forum, trading tips on editing and composition. He said he was 17, homeschooled, and lived in Minnesota. His profile photo was blurry, just a silhouette against a golden sky, but his messages were articulate, warm, and attentive. We moved to private messages within a few days. He told me his name was Evan. He said he struggled to make friends in real life, that people didn't get him. He said I was easy to talk to, that I made him feel seen. I liked that. At 16, being seen felt like everything. We messaged constantly. Every morning before school, every night before bed. He sent me playlists, links to obscure short films, even poems. He never pushed for anything romantic, not at first. He just listened. Looking back, that was part of how he got in. After a few weeks, he said he wanted to video chat. I was nervous. I told him my parents were strict and didn't like me talking to people online. He said he understood and didn't bring it up again for a while. When he did ask again, he added, I just want to see your face. It feels weird to like someone and not even know what their laugh looks like. I agreed, but only for a second. I turned on my webcam in my bedroom, pointed carefully so nothing personal was visible. He didn't turn his on, said his camera was broken. I believed him. He smiled with his voice. Told me I looked kind. It felt good. I felt wanted in a way that felt safe. I didn't think of it as love, but it was close enough for a lonely teenage girl to want to believe in it. About a month in, he began asking more personal questions. What school I went to, what part of Wisconsin I lived in, what my street looked like in the fall. I never gave exact details, but I shared enough that someone determined could piece together a rough outline. At the time, it felt harmless. He said he just wanted to picture where I lived, that he liked imagining what my world looked like. He made it sound romantic. One night, he got quiet. I asked what was wrong, and he said, I wish I could just be there with you. Like, show up and walk you to school. Bring you coffee. Just be real. It made my heart flutter. He said he'd been thinking about visiting Wisconsin. Not for you, he added quickly. I've got family there, but maybe I'd get to see you too. I told him I didn't think it was a good idea. My parents would freak out. He said he understood. He always said that. Then things started to shift. He began getting jealous when I didn't respond right away. He'd send strings of texts. Where are you? Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? followed by apologies. Sorry, I just care a lot. Maybe too much. I brushed it off. I told myself he was just sensitive. Then one Saturday morning, I woke up to a message that made my stomach drop. I saw your blue mailbox on Google Maps. It's cute. I bet your house looks even better in person. I hadn't told him my address, but I'd once mentioned the name of a nearby park and the color of my front door. Suddenly, I remembered every small detail I had dropped over the past 2 months. The school name visible on my hoodie in a photo. The town name on a bookstore receipt I'd posted. The bus stop I'd taken a selfie near. He'd been collecting breadcrumbs. I stopped responding. I told my parents I wasn't feeling well and stayed home all weekend. I deleted the Friendboard app from my phone, but the messages kept coming. He found me on Instagram, even though my handle had nothing to do with my name. He messaged me there, saying he missed me, that he was worried, that he was already on his way. I just want to talk, he wrote. I'm almost there. I showed my mom the messages. Her face went pale. She called the police. Officers came to our house and took my phone. They asked me everything, how we met, what I told him, whether I'd ever shared my address. I said no, not on purpose. They told us to stay inside. They had someone patrolling the neighborhood. That night, I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., a neighbor's security camera caught a man walking down our street. Not a teenager, not a boy from Minnesota. He was in his 50s, heavy-set, wearing a baseball cap and a jacket with the hood up. He walked slowly past our house, stopped at the edge of the driveway, then moved on. The police traced his license plate the next day. He was found 2 towns over, parked outside a motel. Inside his room, they found a phone with dozens of screenshots from my social media profiles. Printed photos of me I had never seen before. Notes about my school, my schedule, and even my friends' names. They also found a duffel bag with rope, duct tape, and an unlabeled bottle of pills. He was arrested on multiple charges. His real name was Harold. He was 57. He'd been doing this for years, posing as teenagers, grooming girls online, waiting until he had just enough information to find them. I sat with the detective for hours going over everything. I remember her voice, calm, measured, as she said, "You are not to blame. He's a professional manipulator. This isn't your fault." But I still felt like it was. I felt dirty, stupid, naive. The story made local news. My school found out. I took a few days off, and when I came back, people looked at me differently. Some were kind. Some whispered. A few girls told me they'd talked to Evan too. I started therapy. It took a long time before I could be alone in the house without locking every window. I started checking under my car before getting inside. I began flinching when I got a friend request from anyone I didn't recognize. I never went back to Friendboard. I deleted every app one couldn't verify. I changed my phone number. I went private on all social media. I learned to keep my world small. People like to think things like this only happen to kids who are careless, who overshare, who make bad choices. But that's a lie. I was cautious. I was smart. I was guarded. And he still found me. Because predators don't need you to be reckless. They just need you to be lonely, curious, kind, human. I'm 20 now. I'm in college studying digital forensics. I want to help catch people like him. I want to make online spaces safer. It started with a swipe. I wasn't even planning to meet anyone. I downloaded the app more out of boredom than intention, just something to pass time between work shifts and late-night gaming sessions. It was the middle of winter in northern Michigan, and almost everything felt like it was either frozen or asleep, including me. So when I matched with a girl named Jessa, I didn't think much of it. Her profile was pretty standard. A few selfies, one mirror pic, a dog in the background of one photo. Her bio said she liked late-night drives, old horror movies, and people who don't flake. I messaged her first. Just hey. She responded almost instantly. Hey stranger eyes. We talked for about 5 hours that night. Nothing too deep, favorite foods, guilty pleasure movies, weird dreams, but she had a fast, funny way of replying. Every answer felt like a challenge, a dare to keep up with her. She asked for my Snapchat. I gave it. That's when things changed. Texting her on the app was like stepping into a different version of her. She sent photos constantly. Not inappropriate ones, just pictures of her face, her shoes, her room, but always with a filter, always with some cryptic caption like "wish you were here" or "you'd look good in this light." It was flattering at first. Then it got clingy. She messaged constantly. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, she'd send or a wow okay, or just a string of sad emojis. I told her I was busy with work, which was true. I was working long shifts at a repair shop and doing freelance code work at night. But Jessa didn't seem to accept that. If you were really into me, she wrote once, you'd make time. That was the first red flag I didn't take seriously. The second came a few nights later, when she Snapchatted me a photo of a street sign. It took me a second to recognize it. It was 1 block over from my house. Going for a drive, she wrote underneath. Thinking of you. I stared at the screen. My stomach tightened. I hadn't told her where I lived. Not even my neighborhood. I replied, "Are you in my city?" She didn't answer. Instead, she sent another photo. This one was darker, blurry, but I recognized the background. It was the gas station at the corner near my street. My throat went dry. I called her. No answer. I messaged her. Seriously, why are you near my place? Nothing. 10 minutes later, she sent one more snap. It was my street. My actual street. The caption said, "Cute little house, Blackheart." That's when I locked my doors. I live alone in a small 1-story rental just outside Traverse City. It's quiet, mostly surrounded by pine trees and old neighbors who keep to themselves. The kind of place where the silence is a feature, not a flaw. But that night, the silence felt wrong. I turned off all the lights and peeked through the blinds. I didn't see a car. No one on the street. I messaged her again. You need to leave. This isn't okay. No response. I sat on my couch for the next hour, phone in hand, trying to decide if I was overreacting. Maybe she was just messing with me. Maybe the photos were old. Maybe it was a bizarre coincidence. Then I heard the knock. Not on the door. On the window. A soft, deliberate knock from the side of the house by my kitchen. I froze. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. I crept to the kitchen, staying low, and peered around the corner. There was a figure outside the window. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I saw the outline of long hair and a hooded sweatshirt. She was standing with her head tilted slightly, like she was listening. I backed away and grabbed my phone. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone outside my house. A woman. I think she followed me from a dating app. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking me questions, telling me to stay calm. Officers were on the way, she said. Then another knock. This time on the front door. I crept toward it and looked through the peephole. It wasn't just her. There were 2 other people with her, guys, maybe early 20s. One had a hoodie pulled tight around his face. The other was holding something, maybe a phone, maybe not. They weren't trying to break in. They were just standing there, smiling. I didn't say a word. Didn't make a sound. The dispatcher asked, "Are they still there?" "Yes," I whispered. 3 of them now. Units are 2 minutes away. Stay inside. I heard one of them say something I couldn't make out. Then laughter. Then a loud bang on the door. One of the guys had kicked it. I flinched but stayed quiet. Then suddenly they all ran. I peeked again. Red and blue lights were flashing down the street. A patrol car pulled up fast, and the group scattered into the woods behind my property. 2 officers got out and gave chase. They didn't catch them, but they found the car parked down the street, a silver hatchback with out-of-state plates. Inside were fast food wrappers, 2 backpacks, and a phone that didn't have a lock screen. One of the officers let me scroll through it. Jessa wasn't Jessa. Her real name was something else entirely, and she was 19, not 22 like her profile said. The 2 guys she was with had criminal records, minor stuff, but one had a prior for attempted theft. The police said it seemed like some kind of setup. Maybe petty robbery. Maybe worse. I gave them everything, screenshots, messages, the Snapchat info. They filed a report and told me to be alert for the next few weeks. They never came back. Not to my knowledge, anyway. I deleted Snapchat the next day. Deleted the dating app too. I changed my address on everything I could. I installed a camera outside. And I haven't used my real location in any app since. People talk about catfishing like it's just awkward or embarrassing. I used to think I was a good judge of character. I'm not saying I could see into people's souls or anything, but I trusted my instincts. When someone seemed off, I usually caught it, body language, tone, the way someone looked at their phone more than they looked at you. Little things. But this time I missed it. Or maybe I didn't miss it. I just didn't want to believe it. It started with a rerouted walk home. I had just gotten out of a meeting for a community arts project in downtown Louisville. It was a Friday in spring. the kind of evening where the breeze smells like rain and pavement and change. I cut through a side street to avoid the crowd near the stadium, and that's where I ran into him. Literally. I was looking down at my phone, texting a friend about dinner plans, when I bumped into a guy coming around the corner. I apologized, flustered, but he just laughed and said, "No harm done." He had a deep voice, calm and slightly gravelly, like someone who smoked but had recently quit. His smile was easy, like he was used to disarming people. He asked if I was okay, and then, unexpectedly, if I wanted to grab a coffee. I hesitated. I don't usually say yes to strangers on the street, but something about him felt familiar. Not like I knew him, but like I could. His name was Darren. He said he lived nearby and was on his way to meet a friend who had just canceled. "Fate," he joked. "I guess I was supposed to run into you instead." We sat at a small cafe a few blocks away. I figured I'd stay for 20 minutes, maybe 30. We ended up talking for 2 hours. He was funny, sharp, and attentive. He asked about my job. I worked as a part-time grant writer for a nonprofit, and actually seemed interested. He told me he was a contractor, mostly small remodeling jobs, and had just finished working on a downtown loft conversion. He had a scar on his hand, which he said was from a table saw accident years ago. He didn't ask for my number, which I appreciated. Instead, he said, "I'll be at the same cafe next Friday. If you want to continue this conversation, I'd love to see you again. If not, no pressure." I surprised myself by showing up the next week. We kept our meetups simple, coffee, walking, talking. He never made a move beyond a hug. He said he didn't want to rush anything. "Real connection takes time," he said more than once. I was tired of swiping, tired of the endless loop of digital flirtation that never led to anything meaningful. Darren felt different, grounded. It wasn't until our 4th meetup that something shifted. We were walking along the riverfront after sunset. He was telling me a story about a job he once did in Chicago, helping convert an old warehouse into a loft. At one point, he mentioned a disagreement with a client. "They were trying to short me on payment," he said. "I don't let people take advantage of me." The way he said it, it wasn't angry, but it was firm. Heavy. I asked, "What did you do?" He smiled, but not like before. "Handled it." I let it slide. Later that night, I mentioned Darren to my friend Cassidy, the one who never trusts anyone until she's done a full background check. She raised an eyebrow and asked, "Last name?" I laughed. "I don't know. We're taking it slow." She didn't laugh back. "Get it? Just in case." The next day, I texted him casually and asked for his last name. He hesitated, then sent, "Winslow." Cassidy ran it through a public records site. What came back didn't make sense. Not at first. There was a Darren Winslow, born in the same year mine had said, living in Kentucky. But there was more. Arrest records. A conviction. A mugshot. I stared at the screen. Assault. 1st degree. 10 years ago. I clicked to view the details. The conviction was from 2012. He had served 7 years in prison. The case involved a violent altercation with a coworker. The records didn't say much, but the headlines from local papers did. Man sentenced in brutal workplace attack. Construction dispute turns violent. Apparently, Darren had beaten a man so badly he fractured his skull. The victim survived, but barely. Darren was charged, convicted, and served time in a medium-security prison before being released. I sat in my apartment, scrolling, heart thudding. This couldn't be the same person. Could it? The next time we met, I noticed things I hadn't before. The way he scanned the room before sitting down. The way he kept his back to the wall. The way he flinched slightly when a car backfired outside the cafe. I didn't bring up what I'd found. Not yet. Instead, I asked, "Have you ever been in real trouble before?" He paused, then smiled. "Haven't we all?" It wasn't an answer. That night, I called Cassidy and told her everything. She insisted I stop seeing him. I said I wasn't sure. I wanted to believe people could change. That maybe he had a temper once, but had learned from it. That maybe prison had made him better. Then came the night I was supposed to meet him for dinner. He was late. 20 minutes. Then 30. I texted, called, no reply. I was about to leave when I saw him walk in. His hair was messy, his shirt untucked, his eyes darker than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked. He sat down hard and said, "Traffic. Some guy cut me off. Idiot." I said something like, "That sucks," trying to keep it light. Then he slammed his hand on the table. Do you know how close I was to following him? Just to teach him a lesson? The cafe went silent around us. I stared at him. He looked at me, breathing heavily, then softened. "Sorry," he said. "I've just had a day." I nodded, but I was already reaching for my bag. "I think I should go," I said. He didn't stop me. I walked out, heart pounding, and didn't look back. That night, I blocked his number. I deleted his messages. I told Cassidy everything. The next day, I changed my routine. I took different paths to work. I parked in new spots. I stopped going to our usual cafe. I kept my eyes open. He never contacted me again. Maybe he understood. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he was just waiting for someone else. I don't know. What I do know is this. A charming smile isn't proof of kindness. A calm voice doesn't mean someone's safe. People can carry rage in their pockets and never show it, until they do. It started with a swipe. I wasn't even planning to meet anyone. I downloaded the app more out of boredom than intention, just something to pass time between work shifts and late-night gaming sessions. It was the middle of winter in northern Michigan, and almost everything felt like it was either frozen or asleep, including me. So when I matched with a girl named Jessa, I didn't think much of it. Her profile was pretty standard. A few selfies, one mirror pic, a dog in the background of one photo. Her bio said she liked late-night drives, old horror movies, and people who don't flake. I messaged her first. "Just hey." She responded almost instantly. "Hey, stranger eyes." We talked for about 5 hours that night. Nothing too deep, favorite foods, guilty pleasure movies, weird dreams, but she had a fast, funny way of replying. Every answer felt like a challenge, a dare to keep up with her. She asked for my Snapchat. I gave it. That's when things changed. Texting her on the app was like stepping into a different version of her. She sent photos constantly. Not inappropriate ones, just pictures of her face, her shoes, her room, but always with a filter, always with some cryptic caption like "wish you were here" or "you'd look good in this light." It was flattering at first. Then it got clingy. She messaged constantly. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, she'd send a, or a wow okay, or just a string of sad emojis. I told her I was busy with work, which was true. I was working long shifts at a repair shop and doing freelance code work at night. But Jessa didn't seem to accept that. "If you were really into me," she wrote once, "you'd make time." That was the first red flag I didn't take seriously. The second came a few nights later, when she Snapchatted me a photo of a street sign. It took me a second to recognize it. It was 1 block over from my house. "Going for a drive," she wrote underneath. "Thinking of you." I stared at the screen. My stomach tightened. I hadn't told her where I lived. Not even my neighborhood. I replied, "Are you in my city?" She didn't answer. Instead, she sent another photo. This one was darker, blurry, but I recognized the background. It was the gas station at the corner near my street. My throat went dry. I called her. No answer. I messaged her. "Seriously, why are you near my place?" Nothing. 10 minutes later, she sent one more snap. It was my street. My actual street. The caption said, "Cute little house, Blackheart." That's when I locked my doors. I live alone in a small 1-story rental just outside Traverse City. It's quiet, mostly surrounded by pine trees and old neighbors who keep to themselves. The kind of place where the silence is a feature, not a flaw. But that night, the silence felt wrong. I turned off all the lights and peeked through the blinds. I didn't see a car. No one on the street. I messaged her again. "You need to leave. This isn't okay." No response. I sat on my couch for the next hour, phone in hand, trying to decide if I was overreacting. Maybe she was just messing with me. Maybe the photos were old. Maybe it was a bizarre coincidence. Then I heard the knock. Not on the door. On the window. A soft, deliberate knock from the side of the house by my kitchen. I froze. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. I crept to the kitchen, staying low, and peered around the corner. There was a figure outside the window. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I saw the outline of long hair and a hooded sweatshirt. She was standing with her head tilted slightly, like she was listening. I backed away and grabbed my phone. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone outside my house. A woman. I think she followed me from a dating app. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking me questions, telling me to stay calm. Officers were on the way, she said. Then another knock. This time on the front door. I crept toward it and looked through the peephole. It wasn't just her. There were 2 other people with her, guys, maybe early 20s. One had a hoodie pulled tight around his face. The other was holding something, maybe a phone, maybe not. They weren't trying to break in. They were just standing there, smiling. I didn't say a word. Didn't make a sound. The dispatcher asked, "Are they still there?" "Yes," I whispered. "3 of them now. Units are 2 minutes away. Stay inside." I heard one of them say something I couldn't make out. Then laughter. Then a loud bang on the door. One of the guys had kicked it. I flinched but stayed quiet. Then suddenly they all ran. I peeked again. Red and blue lights were flashing down the street. A patrol car pulled up fast, and the group scattered into the woods behind my property. 2 officers got out and gave chase. They didn't catch them, but they found the car parked down the street, a silver hatchback with out-of-state plates. Inside were fast food wrappers, 2 backpacks, and a phone that didn't have a lock screen. One of the officers let me scroll through it. Jessa wasn't Jessa. Her real name was something else entirely, and she was 19, not 22 like her profile said. The 2 guys she was with had criminal records, minor stuff, but one had a prior for attempted theft. The police said it seemed like some kind of setup. Maybe petty robbery. Maybe worse. I gave them everything, screenshots, messages, the Snapchat info. They filed a report and told me to be alert for the next few weeks. They never came back. Not to my knowledge, anyway. I deleted Snapchat the next day. Deleted the dating app too. I changed my address on everything I could. I installed a camera outside. And I haven't used my real location in any app since. People talk about catfishing like it's just awkward or embarrassing. In 2006, I was still figuring out what it meant to start over. I had just moved to Columbus, Ohio, after a dragged-out breakup with someone I thought I'd marry. We'd been together for almost 4 years, college sweethearts who slowly turned into roommates who barely spoke. I left her the apartment, packed everything I owned into my beat-up sedan, and took the first IT job I could find at a medical software company. The job was fine. The city was okay. I didn't know anyone. So I started spending most evenings parked in front of my old Dell tower, eating takeout and checking Yahoo personals. That site was the Wild West. No swiping, no identity checks, just usernames and grainy photos. I wasn't expecting much, but I figured it couldn't hurt to put myself out there. And then I got a message from LexiStar88. Her profile photo was bold, dark red lipstick, black eyeliner, a smirk that looked like it knew something you didn't. Her bio read, "I'm not looking for vanilla. I like people who challenge me. If you're boring, please swipe left." Just kidding, this isn't Tinder, but you get the idea. Everything about her screamed heightened intensity. Normally I'd avoid someone like that, but I'd been feeling invisible lately. Something about the way her photo looked straight into the camera made me feel seen. So I messaged her. "Not vanilla, but I do like cake. Does that disqualify me?" She replied within 10 minutes. "Only if it's carrot cake. That's unforgivable." We clicked instantly. Her messages were sharp, flirty, but not crude. She had a weird sense of humor that matched mine. She joked about starting a cult based on bad puns and said she wanted to be a benevolent dictator with good lighting. We messaged for hours that night. Then again the next day. And the next. She said she was between jobs, figuring things out, but she didn't seem aimless. She talked about energy, about people's auras, and how she could always spot liars. I chalked it up to spiritual talk. A little new age-y, but not a deal breaker. After a week, she asked if I used any messaging outside Yahoo. I gave her my AIM screen name. From that point on, things got more personal. She started asking deeper questions. What scared me, what I regretted, what I wanted that I hadn't told anyone else. I answered honestly, for the most part. She never got too graphic, but she was forward. She talked about attraction, connection, and testing people's limits. That's when she mentioned the test. It started as a joke. She said she didn't meet people right away because she'd been burned before. She said she'd created a system to weed out the liars and cowards. I asked what kind of system. She said, "I have a friend. He meets people for me. Sees what their energy is like. If it feels right, then I meet them." I thought she was joking. So I sent, "What, like a predate bouncer?" She replied, "Exactly. But more like a spiritual filter. He's good at reading people." I didn't answer right away. It felt off. She sent another message. "Don't overthink it. He just talks to them. Feels them out. Makes sure they're not hiding anything." I asked, "So, you want me to meet your friend before I meet you?" "Yes." I stared at my screen for a long time. I thought about how good our conversations had been. How she seemed genuinely interested in me. Was this some kind of social experiment? Maybe she was eccentric, but not dangerous. I replied, "Where would this meeting take place?" She wrote, "Wherever you're comfortable. He's flexible. He can come to you." That's when the alarm bells started ringing in my head. I didn't answer. She messaged again. "You said you're not afraid of intense people. Was that a lie?" I typed out a response, then deleted it. Then she sent a photo. It wasn't of her. It was a man, bald, mid-30s maybe, sitting on a couch in a dimly lit room. He was wearing a sleeveless leather vest, arms covered in faded tattoos, and looking directly into the camera. The caption said, "This is Corey. He's very intuitive. And very loyal." I didn't respond. The next day, I logged into Yahoo Personals to check her profile. It was still up, but now the photo was different. It was the same woman, but the bio had changed. Now it read, "Some people aren't ready for truth. That's okay. They just won't find me." I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe this was her way of brushing me off. Maybe she'd pulled this stunt before. I told a coworker about it, just the vague outline. He laughed it off. "Sounds like a kink thing," he said. "Probably harmless." But something in my gut said it wasn't. That night, Lexi messaged me again. "Corey said you're not ready." That's disappointing. Then, we could have learned a lot from each other. I blocked her on AIM. Blocked her Yahoo account too. I even unplugged my desktop for the night. Something about her words felt final. Like a door closing. But it didn't stop there. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. A man's voice. "You missed your chance. Not everyone gets another one." I called my phone provider the next day and changed my number. After that, there were no more messages. No emails. No late-night knocks. Just silence. But the fear lingered. I kept checking the peephole before opening the door. I started parking in a different spot. I double-checked my locks every night. For a while, I thought maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe she was just playing games, seeing how far I'd go. Maybe it was some twisted version of flirting. But then, 6 months later, I was talking to someone at a local tech meetup. The conversation veered toward dating horror stories, and I mentioned the friend test scenario vaguely. The guy's face changed. He said, "Wait, was her name Lexi?" I nodded slowly. He pulled out his phone and showed me a saved thread on Reddit from earlier that year. Someone had posted about a woman on Yahoo Personals who talked about screening potential dates by sending a male friend first. The friend showed up unannounced at the poster's workplace and waited in the parking lot. When the guy refused to speak to him, the woman's account disappeared, and the man received threatening emails for weeks after. Same name, same description, same photo even. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. I don't know what their endgame was. Robbery? Blackmail? Something worse? I never found out, but I've never forgotten the way she said it, like it was normal. Like being tested by a stranger you'd never met was just part of the dating protocol. People like to say online dating is just a modern way to meet people, that it's all harmless if you're careful. But not every danger is loud. Not every threat comes with a warning. When I just finished college, I was living in a one-bedroom townhouse/split. I met a guy on Plenty of Fish, and at that time I wasn't exactly smart about my online digital footprint. Not like I've really changed, but at least now I'm not as ridiculous. Anyways, he seemed like a decent guy. He was really good looking, said he had a good job, nice teeth, don't judge me, and looked like he cared about his personal health. All things I would typically look for in a guy. I'm not a shallow human, but I like to be presentable, and if I'm with someone I would like them to care about being presentable in a business environment also. After about a week of chatting online, we agreed to meet. We met at a restaurant downtown, which was really far from where I lived. When I got there, I noticed him standing at the door. We sat down to eat, and the evening went great. At the end of the date, we said bye, and I got into my car and began to drive away. I realized right away that he was following me. Because of the distance to my house, I wasn't immediately scared because it's a big city. Maybe he'll turn off the freeway. He didn't. My exit was coming up, and I decided not to take it. I kept driving. I circled the entire city on the freeway, and he stayed right behind me. I was starting to panic a bit, so I decided to go to my friend's house instead of mine, and when I pulled out the exit I noticed he didn't. So I had a little bit of a moment to breath and decided, okay, screw it, I'll just go home. I took the off-ramp back onto the freeway and began going back to my exit. I got home and showered and was getting ready for bed, and I started feeling dumb because was that really him? Am I overreacting? Do I ask him if he was following me? Like just a number of things were racing through my overactive imagination. Or so I thought. I decided I was going to message him and just say, had a good time, good night. And when I started typing, all of a sudden a message came through to my phone of a picture of my car outside my house. I nearly died. My heart jumped out of my chest. I started shaking. I didn't know what to say. And he texts me and says, I didn't know you lived across the street from me. I've met my neighbors, and not once have I ever met him. There's a huge apartment complex kitty corner to my townhouse, so maybe that's where he lived, I don't know. I popped up and went to look outside, and there he was just standing there outside like he was waiting for me. I opened the door and he asked if he could come in, and if I wanted to still hang out. I told him I was exhausted, and I'd rather just crash out as it had been a long day. The next morning I woke up to go to work, and my windshield had been smashed. My car was keyed, my back 2 tires were slashed. And as I was noticing the damage to my vehicle, the guy comes out of his car with 2 coffees and is like, oh, I thought I'd surprise you with a morning coffee. So again, I'm like freaked out. I called the cops and reported the damage to my vehicle. This guy offered to drive me, and something in my gut was like, don't get in that car. So I called my boss, told them the situation, and explained I wasn't going to be there until after the police came. This guy just hung out the whole time, BTW. When the police finally got there, this guy was acting really suspicious. He walked away and was like hiding on the other side of his car. I filed the report. The police basically said, hope you have insurance, and we're on their way to leave. They pulled around the corner, and all I heard was the siren on the cops' lights turn on, and the cops scream, freeze, put your hands in the air, and get down on your knees. I look, and the cops got his gun drawn at this guy, and this dude's like on the ground getting arrested. I spoke with the cop after he got into the back, and he explained he was wanted for stalking, breach of probation, assault with a deadly weapon, fraud, and aggravated sexual assault. I was shook. It took me a couple days to get over the hypothetical situations that could have happened. About a week later, I was on my way out the door to work, and guess who was sitting in my driveway? We live in Canada, so essentially you're released on conditions until you go to jail. I told him I was late for work, but that I'd call him when I was done work. I never went to work that day. I went and found a new apartment on another area of the city. I also changed my phone number and hired my friend's husband and his friends to go pack my apartment up and move it to their place for a month, and then move it to my new place because I was so scared this dude would follow them while moving. So that's my horror story of the first time I used plenty of fish. When I tell people this story, I usually start with, he played piano like a dream, and then it turned into a nightmare. It's a cheap lead-in, sure, but it's the truth. There was a moment when I thought I had met someone brilliant, someone rare, and then just as quickly, I realized I was in danger. It was February. Portland was in one of its moody phases. Overcast skies, cold rain that never fully committed to being snow. I'd just gotten out of a relationship that left me feeling like I'd aged 5 years in 6 months. Dating again wasn't on my radar yet, but one night, after too much wine and a little self-pity, I re-downloaded Hinge. The app felt like digital whiplash. Everyone had a curated personality. Guys holding fish, guys posing with nieces they hoped would be mistaken for daughters, guys writing bios like CEO of Making You Smile. I was about to delete it again when I matched with someone named Trevor. Trevor's profile was, in a word, elegant. A black and white photo of him at a grand piano, tousled hair, sleeves rolled up. His responses were thoughtful. Under dating me is like, he'd written, a slow symphony. Starts gentle, ends unforgettable. I rolled my eyes, but I was intrigued. He messaged me first. Bach or Chopin? I replied, Chopin. More heartbreak per measure. He wrote back, you just moved to the top of my list. We started talking daily. Unlike most guys I met online, Trevor didn't rush. He wasn't trying to impress me with money or sarcasm. He was calm, introspective. He told me he'd studied classical composition in Vienna for 2 years and now worked as a freelance composer for documentaries and indie films. He said he lived alone, preferred bookstores to bars, and that music was how he processed the world. We'd been messaging for about 10 days when he suggested we meet. I'd love to play something for you, he said. Not a show. Just a quiet evening. Wine, music, honest conversation. I hesitated. I wasn't in the habit of going to strangers' homes for a first date, but we'd FaceTimed twice. He'd been polite, soft-spoken, a little shy even. I let my guard down. I agreed to meet at his place on Saturday night. His house was in a quiet neighborhood on the city's northeast side, old craftsman style, with dark trim and a red door. It looked like it had a story. I parked across the street and texted him. He came out to greet me, barefoot on the porch, holding a glass of red wine. "May," he said, smiling. "You're even more radiant than your profile." I laughed awkwardly. "Nice to meet you too." Inside, the house was dimly lit, warm, and smelled faintly of sandalwood and something spicy, cardamom maybe. The living room was centered around a black baby grand piano. Bookshelves lined the walls. No TV. No clutter. Just sheet music, candles, and a cello resting in the corner. "This place is—" I trailed off, not wanting to sound too impressed. "A little dramatic?" he offered. "No," I said. "Perfectly curated." He laughed and handed me a glass of wine. "Let me play something for you." He sat at the piano and began softly, slow, minor key, delicate keystrokes that didn't demand attention but drew it in anyway. I sat on the couch, watching the way his fingers moved, the way his eyes closed with each phrase. It was mesmerizing. When he finished, I clapped lightly. He turned, almost embarrassed. "It's not done yet. Still working on the bridge." "It's beautiful," I said. He poured us more wine and joined me on the couch. We talked for nearly an hour, about composers, favorite books, childhood embarrassments. He told me his mother was a pianist and his father a stern man who didn't understand art. He said he'd left home at 17 and never looked back. At some point, I noticed the conversation begin to narrow. He started asking more pointed questions. "What's your biggest fear?" he asked. I paused. "Dying without doing something meaningful." He nodded slowly. "What about people? What kind of people scare you?" I laughed lightly. "Manipulative ones, I guess." His gaze lingered a bit too long. "Do you think I'm manipulative?" he asked. I tilted my head. "No. Why would I?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back and said, "You're Jewish, right?" The question caught me off guard. I had mentioned, in passing, that my family hosted Passover dinners. I wasn't religious, but it was part of my background. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Culturally more than anything." He nodded, staring into his wine. "I thought so. I can usually tell." I wasn't sure what to say. Something in his tone had shifted. He looked up at me. "You know, a lot of people pretend history doesn't matter. But it always does." I asked, "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Let's just say I've read a lot of history. Real history. Not the kind you get in school." I tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Like what? Classical history?" He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Like who really pulls the strings?" I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "I think I should go," I said calmly. He didn't move. "You're just like the others." "What others?" "The ones who walk away as soon as I start telling the truth." I stood up. "Trevor, I'm leaving." He rose as well, blocking the path to the door. "You should hear me out," he said. "No. Move." He stepped closer. "All I want is to show you something. I think you need to see it." I backed away. "I'm not interested." He reached for my wrist, not hard, but firm enough to make it clear he wasn't going to just let me walk out. I said loudly, "Let go of me." He did, but only after a slight hesitation that made my heart pound. I grabbed my coat and bag, stepped around him, and opened the door. He followed me onto the porch. "You'll regret this," he said softly. I didn't look back. I drove home with shaking hands, checking my mirrors every 2 blocks. When I got home, I locked the doors, turned off all the lights, and sat on the floor for 20 minutes, trying to calm my breathing. Then I blocked him on Hinge, deleted the app, and reported his profile. The next morning, I called a friend who works in security for a local tech company. I asked if there was any way to trace his name or number. She couldn't find anything concrete. The address was real, but the phone number was a burner. His full name didn't bring up any social media. It was like he existed only in the context of that app. I filed a police report, just in case. I didn't expect much to come from it, and nothing did. But I wanted it on record. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every unexpected sound. I avoided certain streets, skipped concerts, and declined invites from friends. The experience had shaken something loose in me. Not just fear, but a deeper kind of unease. It made me question my instincts. He hadn't looked dangerous. He hadn't acted aggressive, at least not at first. He'd been soft-spoken, poetic, articulate. He'd asked about my dreams. He'd offered me wine and played me music. And yet, beneath all of it, there had been something else. Something waiting to surface. I think about that night often. About how quickly things can shift. about how danger sometimes wears a quiet face and speaks in compliments. I still love music. All throughout high school there was a teacher who I had referred to as Creepy Creep. He deserved this name, and throughout this story I hope you can understand why. It all started in my freshman year. This teacher was an inclusion teacher, meaning he was in charge of taking care of the special needs kids that were allowed to be in the same classes as everyone else. Creepy Creep always seemed alone, and I always felt bad for him, so one day I complimented him on his haircut. I always regretted doing this because ever since, he was always in the same place as me. Later in my freshman year, I had broken my toe at a haunted house. After I came to school for the first time after I broke it, he stopped me in the hall to tell me I should avoid haunted houses. I just laughed it off, but later it hit me that it was really odd that he knew how I broke my toe because I hadn't actually told anyone at school. The next school year, he would always sit with me at my lunch table until my friends showed up. That same year he was running up the stairs and accidentally tripped, which I just happened to see. He seemed fine until he noticed I was one of the students who saw. He started crying, and later that day, he sat with me at lunch apologizing that he never wanted to embarrass himself like that in front of me. My junior year, he gave me this huge hug on the first day, telling me how much he missed me over the summer. This year he would always sit with me at lunch even after my friends would show up. He said my friends weren't true friends if they had a problem with us sitting together. One day at lunch, I was talking about how I was leaving early for a dentist appointment. He asked what time I was leaving, and I said right after lunch. Then a few minutes later he left, which I was honestly so grateful for. Once I got to my car to leave, it wouldn't start. Creepy Creep just happened to be out there though, and offered to give me a ride home. I told him it was fine because my stepdad was on his way to get me, and anyways he had to get back to school. Creepy Creep told me it wouldn't take any time for him to take me home since my house was just down the road. That's when I got really freaked out because he knew where I lived. Luckily my stepdad showed up just in time. Creepy Creep actually introduced himself to my stepdad, saying it was nice to finally meet the man who raised such a beautiful girl. My senior year I ended up going to a different school, and I got a new job as a delivery driver. About a week into the job there was a special note on the bottom of the delivery saying, "Bring to back door, and you can just walk in," which wasn't too odd to me because sometimes that's a common note on delivery for elderly people who can't make it to the door. So I made it to the delivery and went inside, but it was no other than Creepy Creep. When I walked in he went in for a kiss, telling me how much he missed me. I was so terrified because not only was this my creepy stalking teacher, but he had also just kissed me. He told me how upset he was not to hear from me on our 2-year anniversary, but he said he understood because it's hard to keep in touch after being at different schools. He asked me to quit my job and just stay with him for the rest of the day, so we could celebrate our anniversary the proper way. Luckily my boss called yelling at me for taking so long on my delivery. So I told Creepy Creep that I had to go quit my job in person, so I wouldn't get in trouble for keeping the money from his delivery. Then I would come right back. He was so happy and said he was so excited to see me putting more effort into our relationship. So I quit my job and then went straight home and told my parents everything. I also haven't heard from Creepy Creep ever again. I'm a 31-year-old guy currently using my GI Bill to go to college in a city in one of the mountain time zone states. I'm so busy with school and work, so I don't have time to go out and socialize often, so I have to rely a lot on the apps to go on dates. I matched with this really cute girl around my age. We had a good convo, and then we scheduled a date. It was at a bar restaurant not far for either of us to drive, so it was easy. She was very pretty in person, and we got along great. During our conversation, I found out that she worked in a non-cop role at the police station, like a receptionist essentially. I also learned she had a roommate, whom she said was out of town for the holidays. She added that she hated being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked her. I was a little uneasy at that and told her as much, and she said he's harmless, so I kinda let it go. We had a few more drinks and were there about another hour, and at her suggestion, she said we should go back to her place. And I wasn't going to argue it, she was hot lol. She then insisted on driving. I told her I was fine, and she said no, that I had been drinking, and she saw too many DUIs at her job. I got what she was saying, but I only had 2 gin and tonics and was fine, and again she insisted. I thought it was weird, but I didn't care. We went to her house and she walked up and just opened the door. She didn't unlock it, it was already open, which I found very odd because she said she had a stalker and that her roommate was gone. She started feeding her cat, and as she was doing that I saw a bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. I touched it, and it was still cold like it hadn't been there for a while. The cereal wasn't soggy either. I asked her whose it was, and she hesitated and said she ate it as a snack before heading to the bar. It just didn't make sense, and before you could say anything she just kissed me and out her arms around me seductively and said for me to take her to her room. Again, she was pretty hot and I quit caring about the cereal lol. We started fooling around, and I went to close the curtains, and she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed and my back was to the window and she let out a huge gasp. A scared gasp. Her eyes were at the window. I turned around and saw someone in a hoodie, and they took off. I heard the steps running on her back deck. I immediately jumped up and ran out to make sure her doors were locked, and of course the front door wasn't. I ran to it and locked it, and right when I did the door started banging. I went to open it because I was gonna fuck the dude up, or try to, and she told me to just go back to bed with her. I screamed at her and asked if she was insane, and she told me he does this and goes away. And I asked her, "You know this is your ex?" And she said yeah and to not worry about it. At this point, he started banging on the side of the house on the other end, and she didn't seem at all scared and kept trying to get me to go back to her bed. I didn't want to call the cops because for all I know this dude is a cop, or she'd know the cops that showed up and would take her side. I also couldn't just leave because my car was at the bar, and I was terrified. At this point I started calling her out for the door not being locked. The cereal, I openly called her a liar. She couldn't come up with any logical answers, and I had no idea what I was into. I shouldn't have done this, but my fight or flight was pretty much kicked in, and I told her, "If this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I promise I will kill you both." I'm not a hard ass or anything, but my fear told me to let her know that no matter what it was, they'd have a fight on their hands. My thoughts of what were going to happen to me were all over the place. I ordered an Uber off my phone and didn't tell her. I just kept arguing with her and asking what was going on, hoping to just keep her talking and in the room. I stayed right next to the door so I could leave ASAP. Luckily, I never got my pants off, and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I was able to get dressed. The Uber showed up, and without saying anything, I just opened her door and ran out as fast as I could. I looked back at the door, and she was just standing there. It's only been a little over a month, but I honestly have no idea what the fuck I was into. I don't believe the story of just a girl with a crazy ex based off of the factors I told you. It feels like either a robbery or some weird fetishized cuck type thing. I don't know. Definitely something I'm very mad at myself for. I'm a 9-year Navy vet and allowed myself to get into a situation like that. I reported her account on the Uber ride back to the bar, and I told the bartender as well if they ever saw her in there again. I see lots of stories where the user has gone on to OkCupid and gotten a very raw deal. Not the story, but I met my husband there, and he's not a psycho. I am here to join those ranks. First off, I didn't join the site myself. My friends decided that after I broke up with my fiancée, I needed a social life. Apparently staying home reading on Friday nights wasn't good for them. They signed me up, gave me the most embarrassing name that I'll get to later, and did kind of a here you go enjoy wasn't my idea bye thing. I was pissed for a while, but then decided to check it out. I started talking to a seemingly normal guy, and pretty soon we were chatting regularly enough for me to be comfortable enough with him to accept a date. He scheduled it, picked me up from my student hall, and away we went. The night started off good. He made me laugh, told a few jokes, and ordered for me. I'm okay with that, if we're dating and have been for long enough that you know what I like, and what I'm allergic to. This guy ordered the most expensive things, yes things, on the menu for us. Then when it came and I found almonds in one of the dishes, I quietly asked the server if he could take it back, as I am allergic to almonds. Senor Douchebag heard and started wailing on the server, calling him names, i.e. stupid, idiotic, incompetent, etc. I told SDB it wasn't that big of a deal, we just met, how was he supposed to know I was allergic? Wrong move. Apparently he took that as a personal attack on him, and started wailing on me, but pulled out the arsenal of female names he had. Cunt, bitch, skank, and I shit you not, he actually called me a dirty pirate hooker. Yeah, I watched that movie. After a few minutes, he calmed down and started acting like everything was okay, while me and the server look at each other like, what? I decided to let it go as a one-time thing, and continued our meal. He gave the server the stink eye every time he came to the table, and eventually started talking about himself, his cars, job, money, parents' society status, money, country club membership, Did I mention he talked about his money? Hear me when I say, I asked about his family, just his family. At this point, I'm sitting there, gazing at the clock on my phone and nearing the text my roommate, who said she would then call with an emergency point that is very nearly here. I've already caught the server on a bathroom trip and asked him to put my food in a takeaway carton and just have it ready, and asked him to call a cab. Then he utters the magic words. SDB dash, so are we gonna fuck or what? Me dash, I'm gonna say no. Before he could recover from anyone daring to deny him his God-given right to fuck, I stand up, get my things, take the carton from the server, and slip him a 20 and get into the waiting cab. For the next few days, SDB called and texted me, sweet at first, but that morphed into snippy asshole comments, again calling me all sorts of nasty not nice names. I laughed about it after a while, and the story became quite popular in my student suite, complete with different voices and accents. It wasn't a month later that I ventured into another OKC date, but this time I got lucky. It was my would-be husband. When you work the night shift at a roadside motel, you get used to a certain level of weird. People check in with fake names. They ask for towels in the middle of the night, wearing only socks. One guy once brought a live chicken into the lobby and asked if we accepted pets. So when I got the message from Jake_Traveler on Bumble, I didn't think much of it. It was a Tuesday night in late April. I was working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift at the Pine Ridge Motor Inn, just off I-35 outside Des Moines. The motel wasn't fancy, 2 stories, 40 rooms, and the kind of flickering neon sign that made you feel like you'd stepped into a forgotten movie. My job was simple: answer the phones, check in late guests, handle bookings, and make sure no one burned the place down. Most nights I read or scrolled through my phone between check-ins. That night, I was in the middle of an audiobook and swiping through Bumble just to stay awake. I matched with Jake around 12:30 a.m. His profile was vague but harmless: a selfie in a car, one blurry photo of him with a dog, and a bio that said, "Just passing through, looking for conversation, or more." Normally, I wouldn't have even responded, but I was bored, and he messaged right away. "You're cute. Working tonight?" I raised an eyebrow. My profile didn't mention my job, but my photos were clearly taken at the motel lobby desk. I replied cautiously, "Night owl hours." "You?" Jake replied instantly, "I'm staying in town tonight. Not far from you." I hesitated. It wasn't unusual for people to flirt with me while I was at work, but something about how quickly he'd zeroed in on my location made me uncomfortable. I didn't answer. Then about 10 minutes later, the phone at the front desk rang. "Pine Ridge Motor Inn, this is Emily," I said. Silence. Then a low chuckle. "Cute voice," the caller said. I hung up. A moment later, I got another message on Bumble. "Why so cold all of a sudden?" I blocked his profile. 5 minutes later, the lobby bell rang. I looked up. There was a man standing on the other side of the glass door. Tall, pale, wearing a hoodie with the hood up. He didn't try to come in, just stood there, looking through the glass. I reached for the lock control under the counter and made sure the door was secured. Then he raised his hand and slowly waved. I didn't move. After about 30 seconds, he turned and walked away. I watched him cross the lot and disappear around the corner of the building, toward the rooms. I called the manager, Mark, who lived 10 minutes away. "Hey," I said, "there's someone outside acting weird. I think he might be a guest." Mark sounded groggy. "What room?" "I don't know. He just stared through the door. But I matched with someone on Bumble earlier, and now I think it was him." Mark sighed. "I'm coming in. Don't open the door for anyone. Call the police if he comes back." I nodded, hung up, and locked the office door behind me. The phone rang again. This time, it was an internal call from room 212. "Front desk," I answered, heart pounding. "Why'd you block me?" the voice asked. It was him. I hung up again. Then he texted me from a new number. "You're being rude. I thought we had a vibe." Another text. "Do you want me to come back to the lobby? You looked even better in person." I backed away from the desk. I knew room 212 was on the second floor, northeast corner. I checked the cameras. Sure enough, a lone man had checked in around 9:45 p.m., paid in cash, no ID required. He'd signed the ledger as J. Smith. I watched the hallway feed. Nothing yet. Then my phone buzzed again. A video this time. I hesitated, then queued it up with the sound off. It was a video of me. From the side. Taken through the lobby window. I was reading, legs crossed at the stool, unaware. The timestamp was 12:24 a.m., right before he messaged me. I felt sick. The next video came 10 seconds later. This one was of room 212. He filmed himself walking toward the window, pulling the curtain aside and whispering, "I can see you." I called 911. I told them there was a man harassing me, had sent videos, was likely stalking me from room 212. The dispatcher asked if I was alone. I said yes, but my manager was on the way. She told me an officer was en route. I stayed in the back office, crouched behind the filing cabinet, the door locked. I watched the cameras. At 1:03 a.m., I saw him again. He left his room and walked down the hallway barefoot, carrying something in his hand, maybe a phone, maybe something else. He stopped outside the stairwell and looked directly into the hallway camera. Then he smiled. Not a grin. A slow, deliberate smile like he was proud of himself. Then he turned and walked back. Mark arrived at 1:12 a.m., banging on the employee entrance. I let him in shaking. He looked at the footage, scrolled through the videos on my phone, and said, "Jesus Christ." The police arrived minutes later. 2 officers knocked on room 212. At first, no answer. Then the door opened. The man inside was calm. Polite, even. He said he didn't know what they were talking about. Said he hadn't left his room. Said he didn't even have a phone. But the officers found it. Unlocked. With the videos still in the chat thread. They detained him on suspicion of stalking and unlawful surveillance. Later, we found out he had used a fake name and had a record in 2 other states for similar behavior, mostly harassment, invasion of privacy. He was charged. Nothing major. Just enough to keep him away from the motel. But I never worked another night shift again. I transferred to a daytime position at a bookstore and left the motel job within the month. Sometimes I still think about that window. The way he watched me. The way he smiled for the camera. I don't use dating apps anymore. Not because I'm afraid of meeting someone weird, but because I've already met someone who turned a moment of boredom into something dangerous. And because I know now how thin the line is between curiosity and violation. Between a message and a threat. Between a motel room and a trap. Great first date. We had so much in common. We loved musicals and could quote little-known lines from old shows, and he was also adopted by his aunt and her wife, like myself. I was super excited for the second date. It was an insanely snowy and cold evening, and my broke college but could not afford to replace my bald tires, so I had him pick me up at my place. I trusted him after all. We connected on so many levels. He took me to the local hole-in-the-wall bar, but when we went to order food we found out the kitchen was closed. He offered to make me chicken mole SP at his place. I was intrigued and have always liked watching guys cook for me. He drove me to his place, and we had a couple drinks while he cooked me an amazing meal. We started making out on the couch after dinner, and his demeanor changed. He seemed to be getting anxious, and when I pulled away to go to the restroom, something triggered in him. I came back from my potty break to find him talking to someone. My view of the room was obscured from the hallway, so I thought he had a roommate or something that just came home. When he noticed me, he stopped and seemed a little jarred. I entered the living room and turned to the corner of the room his discussion was centered, preparing myself to make a good first impression, and no one was there. Side note, this is not super weird to me. I practice conversations out loud, relive clever past conversations I have had, and even passively act out scenes from my favorite movies and TV shows. Face masks have been a blessing, because I haven't been called out on my incessant, outwardly expressed inner dialogue in a year and a half. I sat back down with him on the couch and did not acknowledge the incident. He was still anxious, so I began stroking his hair and told him how handsome I thought he was. I assumed he was having a crisis of confidence, so I verbally tried to remedy that. We slowly started making out again, and we reclined along the couch with him on top of me. He abruptly stopped after a few minutes and lifted off of me halfway, so I opened my eyes and saw him looking over in the corner of the room. I propped myself up and looked over, but nothing was there. I tried to guide him back down, but he resisted and said, "I don't want to do this in front of her." "In front of who?" I asked. "That little girl," he said. I do not remember most of what he said because I was starting to get freaked out, but he began arguing with this invisible little girl in the corner of the room. I just watched and listened as he got up and talked about me like I wasn't there. He spoke to her like he knew her, so I knew this wasn't a one-time occurrence. This went on for 5 minutes before he said the thing that I will remember forever. "I can't do it. She wasn't supposed to be this pretty and smart." At that moment, I just knew that I was about to be murdered. I started to get off the couch and grab my jacket. He then redirected his attention to me and told me not to leave. He grabbed my arm and pulled me down to the couch and would not let me get back up. "Is this because I have a small penis?" he said. "My penis is perfectly normal, and I think it is really disgusting that women are so obsessed with size. They always want assholes with donkey dicks." I replied, "I would have no way to know what size your penis is. I want to leave because you are making me feel unsafe, and I suspect that you are dealing with some mental health issue right now. Can you please take me home?" At this point, I am trying to decide if I would freeze to death walking the 4 miles back to my apartment, and my conclusion was that it was a possibility. I needed to get out of this house, and maybe knock on doors or something and get help. Keep in mind, back then Uber wasn't a thing. I had to change my game plan. I had to survive this. I started talking to the imaginary girl, and continued the conversational three-way for 45 minutes because my date kept blocking the exits when I would get close. I told her things like, I was sorry that I was making out with hashtag. I know he is your friend, and you don't want to see us being that friendly. I like him a lot too, and I do want to be with him. I'm just really tired, and maybe I can come back tomorrow, and we can all go to the park together. You look like you're getting really tired too, sweetheart. In reality, I was trying to calm my troubled date and make him feel like I wasn't going to ghost him. I talked about how I thought he was one, and that I wanted to wait to have romantic relations because he was so special. Finally, he offered to take me home, and he did so, with the emergency brake engaged the entire journey. When his yellow Mustang pulled up to my apartment, I instantly regretted that he knew where I lived. I kept the act up and kissed him sweetly, and told him to text me tomorrow. I walked into my door and tightly shut the door, turning the lock and sliding the chain. The ordeal was over, or so I thought. I wake up to a loud banging about 3 hours later. I open the door, leaving the chain hooked. Guess who it is? My date proceeded to accuse me of stealing his debit card. He told me he didn't care, but he needed it back. I told him I didn't have it, but he continued to get louder until 2 men from across the hall opened their door. A few days later, dude texted me and told me he found his debit card. He apologized for getting tipsy the other night. About 3 years later, dude contacts me on OKC. He did not recognize me. I told him that we had gone on a couple dates and explained what happened. To which he said, "Sorry that happened, but are you sure that was me?" Matched with a gorgeous woman, and we got to chatting straight away. We had great convo, and no trouble genuinely making each other laugh. She was very responsive and seemed super interested, so was I. So unsurprisingly, plans for a date quickly ensued. So far so good. This was just after the last round of lockdowns had ended where I live. You needed to book just about everywhere, and places were being strict about charging for canceled bookings and allotting 2-hour table time limits. Took the risk and booked for drinks. I show up on time, waiter takes me to the table, I order a drink and chill thinking she's going to be a little late based on the last TXT exchange. 15 minutes and I get a text saying she's struggling to find parking. "Not a problem, no stress, see you when you get here," I respond. 15 minutes later the follow-up, "I'm just around the corner," TXT lands. At this stage I've finished the drink I ordered, and the waiter keeps coming round reminding me I've got limited time on the booking, and asking if I want another drink or to order food. I turn down the drink, not wanting to be half-cut, when slash if my date shows, and don't order food either. Waiter looks very annoyed. I'm thinking about settling the bill and getting on my merry way. 15 minutes later, a total of 45 minutes late, date finally shows. I'm annoyed, but she walks in looking smoking hot, looking even better than her very attractive pics, and apologizes profusely, which lowers the irritation to a simmer that is quickly forgotten. She did make a remark about how she had to take time to get pretty for me. That kinda irked me, but again smoking hot, and besides that quip actually quite charming, so I let it slide. My date orders a cocktail, I get a beer, and she downs the thing before I've gotten a quarter of the way through my beer, and immediately orders another one, and slams that one down before I can finish my beer. Remember, she drove to this date. Waiter does his time, keep thing looking even more annoyed, and we collectively realize not enough time to eat. So I settle the bill and my date, and I decide to go elsewhere. At this point, I'm pretty much sober, but I can see slam him down cocktail Sue is in no state to drive. Turns out she parked her car about a block away, which begs the question why it took her so long to get there if she was parked around the CNR. But Waitev's issue now is she can't drive, and will 100% get a ticket if she leaves her car where it is. I'm a little amused at her plight, but I offer a solution. Find a long-term park for the car, then it won't an issue for the evening. She agrees this is sensible, but she's definitely over the limit, so I drive her car into an overnight-type parking lot with a reasonable weekend rate and think crisis averted. Little did I know what would follow. We kick on to a few other spots round town, and by this point the city is heaving, and we're progressively both getting drunker and drunker, but having an absolute blast. End up at club-type spot dancing, getting handsy and lip-locking with each other. Never had a first date quite so raucous, but this woman is hilarious and good times are being had by all. Then things suddenly turn. She takes a phone call, her face visibly darkens, and she's absolutely seething. Apparently it's someone she did a favor for that turned on her, and she says, "I can be the sweetest, kindest person in the world, but if you cross me I'll destroy you, flushed face." We're both quite drunk, but I can see this line of talk ain't leading to anything good, so I try to change the subject to no avail. She's ranting and getting more and more worked up. People start to stare, and I hold her hand and gently try to calm her down. She flips the script and yells, "Don't fucking touch me." Mind you, we'd been a hell of a lot more intimate already by then than hand-holding, so I'm completely thrown. Time freezes as literally everyone turns to look at what must look like an abusive spouse me. Thankfully, she spots the look of shock/horror on my face, quickly grabs my hand, apologizes, and tries to snuggle into me. I'm deafened by the alarm bells ringing in my head, and all I can think about is how to pull the pin on this date ASAP. I say I'm leaving, get up, walk out. She chases after me. She's now beside herself, emotional, and I say we're clearly both way too drunk, and we should end the date. I offer to pay for her Uber home, and she mutters something about getting a hotel room for the night, as she needs her car first thing in the morn. I tell her that that's a good idea, but that I won't be joining her in the hotel room. I'm going home, thanks very much. She then flies into a rage and demands I help her get her car from parking garage because she's too drunk to do it. I'm like, lady, I'm just as drunk as you. No goddamn way I'm getting behind the wheel of anything right now. Besides, you don't need your car if you Uber home or get a hotel room. She calls me every name in the book, and I walk away calling Uber go home, laughing to myself about my date with Satan's little helper. I receive a barrage of abusive texts and attempts at emotional blackmail. How can you just leave me like this, which I ignore. Get home, turn my phone off, and crash. Next morning I wake up to a video message from her. She went and got her car and drove it home, y'all. The recording was her gunning it down the highway while filming and taunting me. "Sweet baby Jesus, what is wrong with you?" was all I could reply. About 6 hours later she's blowing up my phone, apologizing, saying how she's embarrassed and ashamed, got too drunk, and isn't normally like this. I tell her she's playing with fire with what she did, and that she could have in a moment destroyed her life or worse, someone else's, with her craziness. She agrees. I stop talking to her. Really hope she got help, but yeah, this is the craziest date I've ever been on. I had a date with a girl. I believe it was Tinder though, and our first date was me inviting her to friends' NYE party. This was several years ago. She shows up to my house already pretty drunk. We had a few drinks at my house before heading over to my friend's party. This girl proceeds to get unbelievably drunk and ends up getting kicked out of the party. However, she refuses to leave without me and claims that her purse is at my house. I order this girl an Uber, but she refuses to get in without me, so I do as she is drunkenly demanding, screaming, crying, yelling, everything. It was embarrassing. We go back to my house, and turns out her purse wasn't there at all. It's actually in her car. I ask her to leave because this has already been a horrible date. She initially refuses because now it turns out that she left her jacket at my friend's house. We go back and forth for some time. I continue to offer an Uber to her house. Then she starts telling me that I robbed her because I stole her jacket, and then I am now holding her prisoner here. She then says she wants her father to pick her up, which great, as long as you leave. I start straightening up my house while she calls her father. As I'm cleaning up the table, I notice that she is standing in the corner of kitchen and see her suddenly reach for a knife, and she brings it to her wrist. I sprint for her and wrestle the knife out of her hand. She is crying hysterically. I am able to get a hold of my phone and call 911. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher until the cops showed up to my house about 5 minutes later. 5 officers showed up, weapons drawn. I pushed myself off of her and got my hands up immediately. At this point I'm scared shitless and thinking I'm going to jail for this fucked up Tinder date. She ends up telling the police that I'm a great guy and didn't do anything wrong. She gets hauled off in an ambulance. This was the worst date I've ever had. The icing on the cake is the following day her father comes to my house to pick up his car. He gives me a $50 gift card to a local bar and says, "Sorry for your trouble. She's off of her medication and has been having issues."